A very good morning to all of you and compliments of the season on behalf of Persistent Campus team. My name is Dominic DeMello and I'm part of the campus recruitment team at Persistent Pune. Uh, a big thank you for all of you sparing your valuable time to take part in today's session. And I'm sure we all are in the festive mood of Christmas and very much eagerly waiting to usher into the new year's. And same with us. We're very eagerly waiting for this year to end and something new and positive to come up in the new year. Well, a big thank you to all of you for taking part in our previous sessions. And we had a huge success with approximately 10,000 plus joinings, which happened in all the sessions overall. And the initial sessions were more to do with the leadership, the management's addressing the audience, which consisted of the students, faculty, as well as training and placement fraternity. Going forward, we planned a couple of sessions which are corely related to the technology domain, and we have some of our experts from the organization who take forward these sessions going forward. A warm welcome to today's speaker for the session that we are going to have, and that's on emerging technology trends. And this person needs very less of introduction because he's very well known in the circles in the industry, on the corporate side as well as in the academic sector. A quick snippet to his bio sketch rather. We are pleased to have Dr. R. Venkateshwaran, the Chief Information Officer for Persistent Systems, and a person who's been with the organization for close to 18 plus years. And just quick roundup of what he has done right from his early days till today, what he's been continuing doing. As the Chief Information Officer of Persistent Systems, Dr. Venkateshwaran, very popularly known as Venki as we call him, is responsible for the strategy and operations of the enterprise information systems with a focus to enable transformation and growth of the business. He joined Persistent Systems in 2002 and has undertaken various roles over the years, including that of SVP for Persistence, Industrial and IoT Business, an expert in the IoT domain, Products Business, and Global Chief Technology Officer. Prior to Persistent, he worked for 7 years as a researcher at Bell Laboratories and also the CTO office at Lucent Technologies. He has earned his BTech in 1988 and MTech in 1992 in computer science from IIT Bombay and has a PhD in computer science from Washington State University in 1997. A distinguished academician, also a distinguished technology expert. He holds multiple patents and has authored numerous research papers. He has presented several technical talks in various educational institutions across India as a part of the ACM India Eminent Speaker Program. He is recognized by Savitribai Phule Pune University as a PhD guide in the area of computer information and technology. He is also a member BOS in the Department of CS for Pune University. Welcome, Venki, and we are pleased to have you today on the session and eagerly waiting to listen to your insights on technology. And I think this topic very much suits you because you've seen it right from day one as an engineer passing out to whatever the transformation and the changes that have taken place in the IT domain. For me, I think they say there was an IT boom at a later stage, but this is ideally the IT boom, in spite of people talking about the recession in the market. But I think this is the right time where a lot of technology, knowledge flow that is happening. Students are very eager to understand what the technology throws at them, and no better person than you to take this ahead. So a warm welcome on behalf of all of you to Venki to take us through the interesting topic of emerging technology trends. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. And very warm welcome to all of you. Good morning. Thank you for joining in for today's session. So what I'll be covering today is based on some of the observations, what we see around us. I'll talk about some of the technology trends you're observing. One of the key questions that you may be all asking is, why are we interested in understanding what the emerging technology trends are, right? if you see, the whole objective of keeping track of what's happening around us is to make sure that we are able to understand the technology that is evolving, that's coming up in the next few years, so that we can be better prepared to embrace the technology and take advantage of it and be able to use that for the betterment of whatever we do, whether it is betterment of society, betterment of the organization we are part of, or betterment of ourselves, right? So the whole objective of understanding the emerging technology trends is from that standpoint, that can we get a little bit better insight of what's happening so that we are better prepared. Okay? And I'm sure most of you know that being better prepared and being forewarned is always being forearmed. So having that understanding really helps us and puts us in good stead. Yeah? So with that brief context for why we are going to talk about emerging technology trends, I'll quickly move on to talk about some of the observations. Okay, these observations are not something that you're not aware of. I'm just trying to highlight some of them. Right. So what we are seeing around us is that we are observing that there's a lot of business shift due to the whole digital revolution. Right. So what is digital revolution? Many industries are kind of adopting digital technologies, and thanks to the pandemic, this has actually accelerated in the last 7-8 months, right? So when we talk about industry, which industries are getting disrupted, and you pretty much you name it, and each of these industries has been adopting digital technologies for improving the way they operate, or in fact, when we say disruption, they're actually changing the way they operate. Okay. Let us take one example just to put the whole thing in context. Let's take banks, right? What is a digital bank? A digital bank is basically helping all their customers to interact and perform all the banking transactions digitally, right? I don't know how many of you have visited banks, say 10 years ago or 8 years back. All the transactions that we had to go and personally visit the bank, whether it is to get a checkbook or to deposit a check or to withdraw cash. Some part of it, of course, got done through ATMs, but the whole adoption of ATM was not as prevalent as it is today, right? Then emerged this whole thing about a digital bank, where opening an account or even performing any transactions, all of it is now happening digitally. So there is no real need to actually visit a physical bank, right? Now, if there is no real need to visit a physical bank, then the question comes in, why even have physical banks? And there are some new age banks that have come up that are even completely eliminating the need for a physical infrastructure. A key example in India, it would be somebody like a Paytm, right? We all are familiar with how we use Paytm. And if you see, Paytm talks about them being a bank, right? We have heard of Paytm Bank. Have you ever seen a Paytm bank? Is there a physical building that we go to? Probably not, right? All the thing from starting to opening the account in a Paytm bank to doing all the transactions that we do with a Paytm bank happens digitally, including the KYC process, the authorization, the upper limits to be set. All of it pretty much happens digitally. Okay? So that is just one example of what we call as the disruption that's happening in the digital industry. And this disruption is kind of felt everywhere, right? The other competing banks like the public sector banks, and all the other private banks as well, they all have to today play catch up if they have to be relevant or be even survive this in the coming years, right? And this is happening across, whether you take the automobile industry, or you take healthcare, you take retail, and any industry you take, you pretty much see a similar trend. So the question comes up, what is really driving this whole digital disruption, right? And a very simplistic answer to it is that all of these disruption is primarily driven by software, right? So when we talk about a Paytm bank, what is really driving that Paytm bank is a bunch of software that is written by somebody like one of us. You're all computer science, IT graduates or to be graduates. If you're not written the code, you probably start writing similar code in the coming years once you graduate. And you are pretty much, we are all going to be part of, have been responsible for writing one of these software that is driving the disruption, right? So in some sense, we all have a very key or a critical role to play in this disruption. Okay. So why is this just a piece of software? Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what there's no physical entity. So there is a concept of a Paytm wallet. I'm just taking Paytm as an example, and the wallet maintains your balance. All transactions happen through a mobile app or through a web app, and pretty much everything is driven or run by a piece of code that is sitting somewhere in one of the servers, right? So that is the power of how software is really transforming all these industries, and this is across the world, the various industry segments that we have identified here today. And as I mentioned earlier, right, the adoption of or digital disruption was happening a little bit slowly over the last 4 or 5 years. And suddenly, when the pandemic struck early part of 2020, this whole thing got accelerated. So many of the industries that were sitting on the wall and watching others kind of getting disrupted or adopting digital technologies suddenly had to adopt digital, or they would have just perished, right? And that's the thing that we saw, all of them kind of put on their thinking hats and bring about that change. Okay. So now with this software being the driver for disruption, how is the software development itself changing, right? That industry also has to change, right? And what we are seeing in the software industry as well is that it's also undergoing this whole transformation, and a lot of things that used to be the traditional way of writing software, developing software products has undergone significant change in the last 5 to 10 years, right? Previously, the software used to be developed as part of a long process, right? If you're writing a complicated piece of code, you take a very long time to go through the whole requirements, understanding, developing the the design, and then implementing the design, going through the whole testing process to make sure there are no bugs, and then getting deployed and handing it off to the end customer, who is the end user of the software, right? Today, that is not what's happening. The way the software is now getting developed is what we call as continuous improvement or incremental update, right? Software gets a new version of a software keeps coming up every few weeks, sometimes even every few days. And people who are using, we are all using mobile phones. When you download an Android app, you pretty much, every few days you see a new version coming up of that app, right? And that has become now the new normal, the way people develop software. And this is what is kind of clubbed under the whole agile development methodology. The other key trend that we are seeing is that there's a whole lot of integration across using APIs and microservices and so on, wherein not everything that you need for your application software product to work has to be developed by you, by a single organization. There are other services that are available that can be leveraged. Okay, so rather than talking about it theoretically, let me kind of bring 2 examples to highlight, right? Now, most of you can recognize what this is. This is the Tesla car, and a classic example of how the software development is changing, right? So if you look at the innovation made by Tesla, of course, they have made innovations in the area of, the whole electric vehicle, the whole power management for it, self-driving cars. They have brought in a lot of innovation. But the key, the essence of their innovation is that they are treating the automobile or the car as as the hardware on which they will develop software. Okay. So their most important innovation, as at least the way we see it, is that they have approached the cars like a software. Okay, how do you deliver software to a car, right? And when they take that approach, they are now, when people buy a Tesla car, they are not really buying the Tesla car for itself. They are buying the software and the roadmap that goes with it, right? So what that means is, you buy a Tesla car today and a new feature comes up 6 months from now. Even if you bought the car, 6 months back, you will still get those new features as a software update, right? A simple example is, the ability to summon the car as part of the auto driving capability, you want the car to come and pick you up from wherever you are, right? It may be in a parking lot, and you want the vehicle to come and pick you up from where you are, right? So there's this feature called summon that you invoke, right? Earlier versions of the car did not have this feature, right? Does it mean that somebody who's spending money and buying a Tesla car gets deprived of this feature later? It is not the case, right? A person who is buying a car today and the person who bought the car 6 months back will probably get the same set of features, okay? Because all is being delivered through software or software update. And this software update is not necessary that everybody needs to get it. It can be very, very personalized. It can be delivered to a very small subset of people as needed, so that it can serve a specific purpose. Again, let me just take an example here. About a couple of years ago, there was a major a thunderstorm or a cyclone that happened in the state of Florida, and people were they wanted to really use the vehicle to move up north. It was the cyclone was supposed to hit the southern part of Florida, and people were advised to evacuate and move up north. And everybody was driving on the highways, and the highways were jammed, right? And if you are a owner of an electric vehicle, just like when we have a smartphone, one of the key worries is, will the battery last long enough for you to reach the northern part of the state, right? So what Tesla did was, they understood the scenario, understood the situation, they understood the concerns of their customers who are driving these vehicles, and pushed a software update to invoke an additional 25% battery power. That is kind of a hidden feature of the vehicle. They just enabled it for a very small subsection of the people who are driving the vehicle, okay, from southern part of Florida to northern part of Florida. So this kind of a personalized service is what makes Tesla a key darling of the industry, where people just, once they buy a Tesla, they stick with it, right? And of course, I don't know if you saw today's news item. Our honorable minister, roadway minister and transportation minister, has just announced that he has paved the way for Tesla to start sending their cars in India. So we'll get to experience some of these services firsthand when we get a hold of a Tesla vehicle in our hands. Okay. So this is one example. Another example that I want to kind of talk about is Domino's Pizza, right? We all know Domino's Pizza as a pizza company, but if you ask the CEO of Domino's Pizza, he doesn't look at Domino's as a pizza company, right? If you ask the CEO of Domino's Pizza as to what they do, they look at themselves as a technology company. Okay? In the mid 2000s, one of the biggest challenge that Domino's was having was their market share was at their lowest point, and it was really the business was not kicking off. The competition was really doing very well, and people left very nasty comments about the quality of the pizza and so on, right? And overall the experience of going through Domino's, getting pizza delivered and so on. So the CEO kind of thought about it, and he said, okay, let us become a technology company. Let's focus or change our mindset to be a technology company. And they started adopting technology. And within a very short span of 10 years of adopting technology, Domino's completely reversed their fortune. And today they are I don't know what their numbers are, a few $billion valuation, and they have grown, they continue to grow or probably 20, 30, 40% year on year in terms of market share. Okay. And that's a very significant growth for a large company. Okay. So what did they do right? I mean, one of the things they focused on was, when they adopted technology, was how do you completely transform the pizza ordering business? And this is what we call a digital disruption in this business, right? And today you can pretty much order a pizza through any means, whether it is through the web, through your smartphone, through your smartwatch. And if you happen to have an Alexa or a Amazon Echo, you can pretty much order it through a voice interface as well, right? So overall, it makes your pizza ordering process very, very seamless. Okay, and you get a seamless experience. The other thing they've done is to ensure that they can deliver pizza within 30 minutes. They have analyzed loads of data, almost 17 terabytes of data, and this is data from last year. I'm sure these numbers would have changed by now. And they have looked at getting this data from 85,000 sources about their customers, their partners, their all their suppliers, and everyone. They have made sure that they have integrated all of these, and they can deliver the pizza in 30 minutes to most of their customers to their liking. Okay, and they made that whole experience extremely consumer centric. Okay. So when we order a pizza, we think that once we make the payment, the pizza gets baked into the oven. In fact, it's not so. The pizza dough gets into the oven even before we have actually placed the order, because they use a lot of sophisticated AI technology to figure out whether the customer is likely to order the pizza or walk away from it, and based on that, they are able to pre bake the dough and put the dough in the oven with the toppings that you may have asked for even before you have actually completed the payment. So by the time you complete your payment, the pizza is already half cooked, right? And then all it takes is for the rest of the pizza to get cooked, packed, and the delivery boy is at your doorstep, all within that 30 minutes that they have promised, right? And that's the power of technology that they have adopted. Okay. And they have integrated with so many other services, and that's what makes them a differentiator with their competition, be it the Pizza Hut or Papa John's or whoever else you look at. Okay, these are just a couple of examples of how a Tesla or a Domino's have completely changed the way they do their business by adopting digital technology. And all of this, the heart of it is still a software that makes the whole magic happen. Okay. Now, so the focus basically is how do you adopt technology and how do you deliver great experiences. So the focus is on the end consumer experience. So the two examples that I talked about, be it Tesla or Domino's, completely diverse industries. One is in automobile, the other is in the food and beverages business, but their focus is the same, right? How do you provide extremely powerful consumer experiences? Okay? So when we looked at the new software development, I kind of touched upon it. One is how do you iterate, deliver incrementally and iteratively, and this is we are seeing something that happen, right? New features keep getting installed, right? When we talked about Domino's, right? As and when, I mean, they started it with the web application. You could order pizza through the web, and then the smartphone revolution took on. They started adopting smartphones. Then the smartwatches came in. The voice interfaces came in through the Echo or a Alexa, and they started kind of incorporating or integrating all of that, right? So delivering features incrementally and iteratively makes them, makes any of these software development process really what we call as agile and cater to what the end customer wants, right? The second part I was talking about is interconnecting with multiple systems, whether you are a Tesla, which has to talk about, integrate with their suppliers, their customers, and so on. Same thing with Domino's. We talked about 85,000 data sources, 85,000 places from which they need to integrate their product to make their end user experience, end-to-end experience seamless, right? So interconnecting, not really reinventing everything, is key to this whole software development methodology, right? And the third piece is to provide this personalized experience, need to leverage all the data that's available and build intelligence based on that data. Okay, so these are the three pillars on which the next generation software is kind of getting developed. Okay, so you might have heard of terminologies like agile development and DevOps and data centric or data science and so on. All these are at the heart of the new software development methodology, right? Let me spend a minute on what DevOps is, right? Because that's a new terminology if in case you don't know, right? What we talked about is if you're not going to do all the development yourself, your development team is going to be small, right? So what you're really doing is developing a small piece of code, but integrating your code with many other services, right? Which are already operational. So you need to make sure that end to end your code integrates seamlessly with other people's code, either through a well-defined APIs or through other means by which that integration happens, usually through well-defined APIs. And once this whole integration is happened, you stitch the end-to-end story together, right? And you want to make sure that all of it makes your system operational, and you are able to scale it as needed. As your demand grows, you are able to scale it, and that's where the whole DevOps methodology really comes in handy. Okay, so now the question comes to, when we're talking about trends, what are the current trends? What are the technologies that are in demand in the coming years, right? And this is a McKinsey study that I picked up, very recent, October 2020 study, which talks about some of the things, right? And this is kind of in line with what I have been talking about. DevOps is key way to do it. What are the skills you need for that? Customer experience is very, very important, and this has been something that we've seen as part of COVID, right? And then the use of automation, because when you're stitching together an end-to-end story, you need to be able to bring in a lot of automation to it. Management of data, cyber security. These are some of the key technologies, and of course, taking benefit of the cloud infrastructure to automatically scale up or scale down as needed. All of these are going to be the technologies that will play a significant role in the industry, and not just the IT industry, across all the verticals that I've been talking about. Okay. And this is something that, we have just taken this and we have created our roadmap for where we as Persistent want to be. And some of these things are, how do you bring in conversational UI and augmented reality to enhance a customer experience? How do you leverage AI and deep learning to build some of these models, the recommendation engines, bring in privacy into the whole picture, focus on some of the technologies like blockchain to bring in these end-to-end workflows and so on. Okay, so these are some of our technology focus areas. Right? Now, with that brief introduction to what we see as technology trend, right? Let me shift the gears a little bit and talk about, okay, fine, these are all technology trend. This is what Persistent is doing or whatever, right? End of the day, you are the students who will be graduating. What is it that in it for you, right? And this is where I'm tying some of these things together. Okay, so before I move on, let me just recap what I said. One, I said that software is you are actually not building everything yourself. So what you're going to build is a small piece, but you have to stitch the whole story together, which means that software will be developed in small teams and in short cycles, because you're going to deliver many things in an agile manner, right? So every individual needs to therefore know more. It's not only about knowing what you are doing, it's also knowing how it will integrate with other systems and so on. So the whole DevOps mindset we are talking about is going to be key, right? The second is that the technology change is going to happen rapidly, right? An event like a COVID might come in, or something else may happen. AI or augmented reality may come in the coming 3 to 6 months, and you need to be able to adapt, learn this new technology, and be able to take advantage of it. And this is the whole idea of what I talked about in the beginning about a trend, right? Need to talk about taking advantage of services that are available. So APIs being, taking advantage of the APIs, using the power of data, creating rich user experience. So these are some of the things that I've been kind of alluding to as part of it, right? So moving on in this same thread, right? What does it mean for you as a student, right? How do you build your expertise? So we have this thought process that, as Persistent, and generally when we look at students, we look for two things, right? Do you have the breadth? You're all students of computer science, IT, and so on, right? So you are going to be an engineer when you graduate after 4 years. And what is it that we are looking for? It's a very strong, solid foundation, which is the breadth, right? And within that, we expect you to have expertise in in two areas. One, which is a technology area, and that technology area could be, cyber security, or it could be data science, or it could be networking, or it could be operating systems or algorithms, whatever it is, right? One area that is really, really your strength, and another which is domain. And the domain is whether it is a banking domain or healthcare and so on. And why this domain is important. End of the day, like we talked about, right? Every industry is now adopting software technology. When you might have observed a recent trend in the last 4 or 5 years, the campus as part of the campus hire, the companies that come and recruit CS or IT grads are not necessarily the IT company, right? You see a lot of non-IT companies coming in. In India, for example, you might see Flipkart or a Jio, which is a telecom company, a Flipkart, which is a retail company, or somebody like that, or even an automobile company, right? A Tata Motors or somebody coming in and recruiting CS/IT grads, right? And the reason for that is because they believe that this technology adoption in their domain is going to be very critical, right? Which means if you're going to be part of a bank or a retail or an automobile company, understanding of the domain is very, very important. Okay, the challenges that they go through, what are the typical things that are happening in that industry is a very important piece. So this is going to be a very key focus, a technology and a domain, and having as much deep knowledge there is going to be very useful. Yeah. And of course, we also believe that, as a CS/IT grad, you need to know how to code. And when we're talking code, we're not talking writing programs, right? When we say code, we're talking about adopting the best practices in coding, writing your thoughts very well in a structured manner. Even simple things like how do you name the variables, how do you structure your code, what part of the code can be, put into a function, what part of the code will be left as part of with a lot of hard coding. How do you generalize the code so that with minimal changes you can repurpose that code, and so on, right? And of course, last but not the least is documentation and how well you test the code. Okay, so these are all some aspects of, when we say everybody should learn to code, it's not just about writing the program, it's about writing the program or coding it very neatly in a very structured manner, right? And that is a very important skill for people to pick. And the way to do this is, how do you write good programs is by seeing how other people are written. And today with the open source community on GitHub, you can see a lot of code available for you to, open, read, and see how other people have developed very good code, right? And that provides a very easy way for us to learn how great programs are written by some of the great software developers and use that as a way for us to improve ourselves. Okay. Of course, Bill Gates talking about in his days, he had to go through, code that was printed out on paper, and he had to read the code on paper. But today, given thanks to technology, we have all of that access at our fingertips, right? So I talked about the broad fundamentals, right? What are the fundamentals? We're talking about knowledge of some programming languages, whether it is C, Java, C++, Python, whatever it is. And of course, there are new languages that keep coming up. Some people, become big fans of Go language and so on, right? But these knowledge of at least one or maybe two programming languages is very important. And then there are the core subjects that we talk about, data structures. How do you look at algorithms complexities? What are the operating systems, functions of the operating system? Understanding databases, both relational and non-relational, and some amount of computer networks, because today's world is all about interconnected technologies. So knowledge of computer networks becomes a very important piece, right? So these are some of the core subjects. I'm sure you've all studied it. It's just that make sure that these foundations are really, really rock solid. Okay. Moving on to some of the other areas. So today, if you see, data and data science is a very key area. And it's important that, for this, there's a base, foundational base, which is statistics and maths is very important. And then use that data sciences to become to understand a little bit of machine learning. Okay. And the reason for highlighting this is because data is going to be centric, like we talked about in some of the examples of, how do you provide a very rich personalized experience is through leveraging the data that's already available. Okay, ability to mine the data, ability to come out with nuggets of information, nuggets of insights from that data is going to be key. Okay? But not that all, those are all technology. There's also going to be non-technical skills as well, right? Ability to communicate your ideas, ability to do documentation of the code that I was talking about earlier, ability to speak about it, and of course present your ideas. Okay, so some of these skills, if you see, if you participated in a hackathon or one of these events, you might find that all these aspects are kind of getting covered, right? In hackathons, you get about a 5, 10, 15 minutes to present your idea, present how you approach the problem, and talk about talk about it in a very succinct manner, in a crisp manner, so that the judge or whoever is listening to you gets a feel for what you have done, right? So we try, participating in these events kind of helps you to hone in some of these skills, right? So I'm not going to spend more time. It's kind of 35 minutes, and there were a lot of questions as well. So what I'll probably do is I'll just quickly summarize one part that technology will keep changing. So the only constant that we know is the change happens. So you might have also observed, right? In the last 5 years, a lot of technology changes have happened, right? So the key to surviving in this, and when you graduate, you have 40, 45 years of your career ahead of you, right? How do you make sure that you stay relevant is that as and when the technology changes, as and when new skills need to be learned, make sure that you are able to quickly pick up these new skills. So internalizing the ability to learn new skills becomes the key to success. Okay? So with that, I will pause here and want to, of course, take this opportunity to wish you all the best and taking the time to listen to me. I'll now hand it off back to Dominic to ask some of the questions that came up as part of that some of you have asked. So Dominic, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Venki, for your insightful, value-added knowledge sharing that you've done through the topic for today.
Sure.
And I think it's the apt topic for students who are always in this confusion as to which technology I should pick in my career path ahead. And I think you've touched base every aspect of this particular confusion that's going around in the industry. Well, we had a couple of questions that came up from the participants who are part of the session today, and we'll just take up a few of those questions. And there are some other open-ended questions that have also been posted by the participants. So, to start, before I get into the questions, Venki, what's intriguing and what makes me always ask you this question: what is that mantra and what is that drive that keeps you going on with Persistent for the last 18 plus years?
Okay, that's an easy question actually to answer, right? So see, when you're part of an organization that gives you an opportunity to learn and pick up new things and give you an opportunity to play different roles, then automatically that becomes one very good reason why you stick on. The other key reason is that you will be successful only if you are surrounded by a team and set of colleagues who are really, really brilliant. Okay, and at Persistent, I've been part of Persistent in 2002. We were a very small company then, probably 400 people strong at that time, and today we are a 12,000 people company, right? So I've been part of the growth, and as per being part of the growth, I've got the opportunity to play a diverse set of roles. So that makes it easy for me to say, why I've got all the opportunities to, show my capability as well as pick up new things as and when I got these opportunities, right? My colleagues have played a very, very key role for me in my success. I have met with some of the most smartest guys, whether it is in the area of databases or in the area of AI or augmented reality or blockchain. Yeah, you name it. We have some of the most brightest set of engineers in our organization that I've got to interact with. And more important than not, when you interact with them, every day is a learning process. You get up in the morning, you are excited to see, go meet so and so colleague. What am I going to learn new from him or her, right? And that makes me, get up and come to Persistent all day, every day, right? And that's what kind of that clock has been there. And 18 years is just a number. And I hope to continue for many more years to go, given the set of teams that we have here.
Thanks a lot, Venki. And I think 18 is not going to stop. It's going to continue for many more years. And I think there's a lot available at your end to throw at Persistent and its employees and the industry at large.
I look forward to that, yes.
And for me, my first experience interacting with you was during my induction at Persistent. And when you walked in and I saw this person and I had a little bit of download about you, I was a little bit scared because one, I was getting into the industry back a gap of 10 plus years. So the way you took us through the company overview and what Persistent does, and the knowledge sharing that you did, it really calmed me on my day one itself. So and you've always been an amazing person to interact with. Any kind of solution we need, we know the person who we need to get in touch with. So thanks a lot for your
Thanks
contribution.
for that.
So Ankil, we'll start with few of the questions that came across.
Sure.
So one of the questions that came across is within 4 years of an engineering, how should one charter his path as a student?
Okay. So of course, given that my background is CS and IT, I'll probably focus more on that. So curriculum, I mean, as we said, right, the foundation is very, very important, and that is what makes a good engineer, right? So having a very solid foundation, and if you look at the core computer science courses, I did list up some of them. Be it algorithms or operating system or databases or networks. I mean, these are some of the core courses in which one needs to really have a very solid foundation. And the course structure is typically done in a very nice way so that each of these topics get covered in a different semester, right? That is one part of it. The second part is, thanks to all the changes that are happening in the curriculum, many of the colleges going autonomous, and they have a little bit of freedom and flexibility in changing the curriculum. And I've been part of Pune University as part of the Board of Studies there. I've been part of some of the curriculum design as well. And what some of the changes are coming up are more in the areas of electives, wherein you get to choose the topic that you want, right? So you may be interested in data sciences, you may be interested in cyber security. So you choose your electives right from the third year onwards. So semester number 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So you have four semesters to go, and you pick and choose the area that you want to specialize in, and pick the right kind of electives to navigate through the coursework. Again, these are just electives are add-on to the core curriculum that you cover as part of your typical engineering course. In addition to the technology subjects, today there is a lot of focus on other aspects like design thinking or communication skills, or even some of the humanities courses or economics, which are very relevant because end of the day, when you graduate, it's a whole package, right? It's not just, hey, I'm great in C, C++ or one of those things, right? That is definitely a requirement. But what comes out as an individual, as a graduate that we look for is a complete package, right? Who has a good understanding of technology, is a great engineer, can solve problems, and has a very good way to express it, articulate it through good communication skills, through good reading, writing skills, as well as, able to have a empathetic view of the end customer or the world around them.
Okay. Thanks, Enki. So I think you covered another aspect of one of the questions that came up in terms of how does one identify the domain. So if I have to rephrase it, you don't identify your domain initially. You identify the technology.
Right.
Domain is something that comes once you're part of the organization and part of work mode rather. So few more questions that were more on the technology front as to emerging technologies like blockchain and SaaS, and what has been what would be their importance going forward in the industry. SaaS, somebody had put it across to Indian context, but I felt that it's nothing to do with only India. It's going to be a global technology.
Yeah. So I did talk about the reason I picked up that McKinsey article and highlighted that was it's a very recent article, October 2020. So it's gives a good relevance, and I'm sure what I put up from McKinsey is available in the public domain. You can go and look for it, search for it. You'll find it very, very relevant, right? So the technology that we're talking about, be it SaaS, so what is SaaS? At the end of the day, SaaS is about delivering software as a service, right? So in the traditional way of delivering software, it used to be a packaged software that you would get installed on your computer or your server in your office or your company or at home, wherever it is, right? What SaaS does is completely change the way the software is delivered. It is now delivered not as a packaged software, but as a service. A simple example of a SaaS is, our mail service from Microsoft. They are part of the whole mail and their Office suite, right? It's part of Office 365. So previously, when you had to get a hold of Microsoft PowerPoint or Word or Excel, you have to download that software, you have to buy a license, and then you can use it on one computer at wherever it is installed. Now it's available on the web. You can use a browser, so your end computing kind of becomes irrelevant, and you get all the features of Office software, whether it is Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, right through the browser, right? So the advantage is all your documents are also stored on the cloud. So now wherever you go, as long as you have access to the internet, all your documents are available to you wherever you are, right? And you don't even have to have your personal computer with you. You can go to a cyber cafe, log into your account, and you have access to everything that you own, right? And all the software features that you've the customization that you have done, all of it kind of comes to you exactly the same way it is, seamlessly, irrespective of where you're logging from, whose machine you're logging from. Yeah? And that's the power of software. And the second key thing is when new features come in, everybody gets to experience that new feature right away, because it is the new feature is implemented on the cloud, and everybody gets to see that right away, as opposed to when it was delivered as a in the traditional way. The new feature again needs to be downloaded and installed, and many people forget to download and install, or may not be comfortable doing the download and install, lest it breaks something else, right? So all these become very seamless, and any new feature you get to take advantage of it, and all the features that you want are accessible to you at your fingertips wherever you are, and that's the power of SaaS. Similarly, all the other technologies, whether it is blockchain or AIML, all that is pretty much along the same line. And I talked about some of these, in my presentation. I didn't, of course, get into the depth of it, but definitely something that we can dig deep. If there is interest, I'll be happy to take any questions on the specific technology.
Sure, thanks. So another participant put a question. What are your thoughts on using open source technologies in creating a scalable product?
Okay. So open source has been around for more than 20-25 years now, right? So when somebody thought about this whole concept of how to make software available for the masses, right? They came upon this brilliant idea of making it available for free. And the best part of it is that the contribution to open source happens through a community of volunteers, right? So people volunteer to spend time and contribute. So this is one very, very powerful way you can give back to the society, right? And there are very excellent examples of open source software, be it Android, which is an open source operating system for our mobile phones that we are all very familiar with, or Linux, which is a open source operating system that is almost the de facto standard for most servers, as well as in the cloud environment. So you can pretty much think of how much impact open source has had in our lives, right? Now, building software. So whether you use the cloud infrastructure, which is based on open source, or you use data, which is based on some of the open source technologies like big data technologies like Hadoop or Elasticsearch or Kibana for data visualization, or Apache Spark for data streaming analysis, you pretty much see a significant role of open source, right? So what open source helps us is it gives us a way to experience the new software without having to pay for it. And of course, whatever we build on top of it, there are certain obligations, depending, of course, on the licensing terms. There are certain obligations to contribute back to the community. Okay, and because the community is made of people like you and me, we are able to contribute back. Of course, new features is one. We're also able to test the product effectively without making sure that any small bugs or whatever gets addressed fairly quickly, because there are a million eyes that are looking at this code and are testing it and are able to fix it themselves, right? And all that fixes, everything goes back into the community, so the product becomes very the quality of the product improves significantly over the passing months, right? Of course, one of the downsides of open source also is that there are many such projects, so you don't know which ones to pick. But then people gravitate towards the more popular ones, the ones that are feature rich and the ones that are easy to use. So end of the day, user experience and making sure it solves a particular pain point are the key factors that decide how popular a particular open source component is going to be.
Okay. So one of the participants, Soumyadeep Datta, put a question: how to understand that a particular skill I want to adapt would be beneficial for me in the future or not?
Okay.
A little bit.
Okay. So let me try to answer it a little differently, right? See, skills, like we said, right? The technology changes, right? And the change is also increasing. So it's like the acceleration part of it, right? What was relevant 5 years ago has become irrelevant today. What is relevant today may become irrelevant in 5 years, right? So it's very difficult to say one single technology that will kind of stand the test of time for many years to come, right? Yes, today we do see some of the things like data science or cyber security will probably stay relevant because they have stayed relevant for many years in the past and they will continue to stay relevant. Networking is another area, right? Networking has not, has been around for more than 50, sorry, 45 years or 50 years, almost close to 50 years now, and it has stayed relevant. So some of these technologies will stay relevant in the coming years as well, but the adoption or how we use it has changed over the years, and that is what is very going to be key. So the core technology of the foundation doesn't change a whole lot. That will continue to stay relevant, but how you make use of it is what is going to change, and that will keep changing in the every few years it will change. And so your ability to adapt and adopt new technologies, learn them, and be able to use it for the problem that you're solving is what will make a difference between how successful you're going to be and how you're going to navigate through the whole technology obsolescence that we'll continue to face in our careers going forward.
So, Venki, a question that's come from my end, rather to be precise. Um, Conducting so many interviews, and when I interact with the students, there's often this mindset that I found from students, which states that so what would be my job profile, and the very next level that they speak about is I would be looking at software development as a role,
Yeah,
and I'm not looking at testing or quality. So
yeah.
what makes me a little bit worried is why is this kind of a stepmotherly behavior that students come up with? I will not do anything in quality or testing
Yeah,
because that's one part of the software life cycle, right?
sure.
And how is it different? How do you explain it to a student that that's part of software development also?
Sure. So let me take a couple of things, right? So what I talked about is at the end of the day, it is not about development or testing or whatever, right? End of the day, it's about user experience. So whatever we develop, whoever is a user of that software product, right, has to have a very powerful, rich user experience, right? Now, if that is going to be our overarching vision, right? Whatever we develop, the user community has to find value in it and has to have a very good user experience. Automatically, it comes down to whatever we develop has to be of top-notch quality. I'm sure we have all downloaded. I mean, let's take Android as an example. We have all downloaded apps from the Play Store, right? And what happens when you download the app and you find that it is buggy or it is not properly tested? You immediately delete that app, and or that app stays in your phone dormant forever, right? So you take, I don't know how much time, many times an app is rejected within first 5 to 10 minutes of using the app. Okay, and this is there is a lot of study that has gone in, and the statistics is very powerful there, right? So if you're talking about providing high quality software, then everyone who's part of the team is responsible for ensuring the quality of the end product. Now, there is, and we also talked about that you're going to develop a very small piece of the code, which means it's just going to be a small knit team, and that is responsible for everything, whether it is development, testing, or deployment, right? So that's what the whole DevOps kind of framework comes in, that everybody is responsible for ensuring the development of the product, testing of the product, making sure it gets deployed right and gets used in the right way. The second part is that whatever you develop is now as part of, we said that you will be using other people's work as part of your end-to-end story, which means that your piece also becomes part of the jigsaw puzzle that others are going to use. So if others are going to take advantage or benefit from what you do, if that what you do has not been properly tested, then others will not be able to take full advantage of it. So there's a very thin line between now what is development, what is testing, what is deployment, what is end user experience, what is scaling, what is quality. All of it kind of comes together, right? And we are delivering, when we say we are delivering new features fairly quickly, in a fairly short amount of time, sometimes weeks, sometimes days, we're going to make sure that whatever we output comes out is of top-notch quality, and that means development, testing, all of it goes hand in hand. In the olden days, when people used to deliver software over a 1 year, 2 year period, yes, there used to be, and teams used to be large. Yes, there was a bifurcation which said, okay, this is the design team, this is the development team, this is the testing team. That mindset has completely undergone a change. So what we expect people to do when they come into organizations like ours is to kind of adapt to this new mindset where you are responsible for everything, you know about everything, and you kind of take personal pride and personal ownership for everything, which includes dev, test, operations, all of it.
Thanks, Venki. So one question that's come directly into your domain of specialization, IoT. So one of the candidates has put this question: after being the senior VP for IoT solutions, what is the advice for a second year BTech student regarding the career in IoT?
Okay. So again, I think I'll just repeat myself. See, IoT, I don't know about a career in IoT. IoT is here today, will be there for some more years to go, definitely. But the technology will undergo a lot of change. Okay. For example, even in the last few years, right, when we talked about Internet of things getting connected, right? The key focus was on, how do you first get them connected, right? Whether you use the 3G network, Wi-Fi network, Bluetooth network, or some other network like Zigbee or LoRa or whatever, right? There are a lot of technology changes that have happened. And these LoRa and other things are new technologies now. Sigfox, LoRa, these are newer technologies that are coming. How to connect these devices. Now, with the advent of 5G, many of the challenges of connecting them with low power devices will change, because 5G will is kind of geared to make IoT, address the connectivity of IoT devices as one of its focus areas, right? So the technology will change. So when you talk about IoT, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not about the technology, it's about what problem you're solving. What is the problem that you're going to solve with IoT? If you're going to use IoT for retail, what is the problem you're going to solve? Is it about inventory management? Is it about great customer experience? Is it about just-in-time supplies? Is it about tracking the quality or the antecedents of the product? Whatever problem you're going to solve, that is what is going to be the key focus, not the underlying technology. Underlying technology is a given. The problems that you're going to solve with that underlying technology becomes the key focus area, right? Now you can think about IoT in healthcare, you can think about IoT in banks, you can think of IoT in agriculture. There are many ways in which IoT can be used. So if you're looking to that as a technology, definitely focus on the technology, but be open to the fact that technology is just the underlying layer. What you do with the technology is what is going to make a big difference.
So Venki, one last question, because we are almost close to our timeline of 12. Mm-hmm. Is artificial intelligence superior than other trends like cloud computing or cybersecurity?
Okay, artificial intelligence superior. Right. I don't think any one area is superior to other. I mean, of course, artificial intelligence will be used in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity becomes key when you use data for your AI algorithms. The way you use data, you need to make sure that the data is clean, you don't get malicious data and all kinds of things, right? So they go hand in hand. All of these technologies go hand in hand. So I don't think one is superior or the other. Each of them has its own set of challenges. Each of them have to benefit from the other. For them to be complete, these technologies need to come together. And same thing holds for cloud, right? Is AI superior to cloud? No, without cloud, the ability to process huge volumes of data, which is the key requirement for your AI algorithms to work. Without the cloud, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to process that kind of data, that volume of data. So AI becomes, cloud becomes an essential part of AI, right? And if all your data is in the cloud, how are you going to secure it? How do you make sure that unauthorized access can be prevented? all that becomes part of the cloud as well, right? So security plays a significant role in the adoption of cloud. So without these technologies coming together, you would not have the recent progresses that we have seen. So I wouldn't say any one of them is superior or inferior. I would just say that they're all equally important. There's a lot of challenging work in each of these areas, and depending on one's interest and focus, they can take one or more of these areas and develop their expertise in that.
A big thank you, Venki, for taking these questions and also sharing your valuable insights. It's amazing to have you on the session today, and we kickstart our technology sessions with your first session.
Thank you.
And overall, I think you have touched base every aspect of the technology side, which I think the students had a lot of queries in terms of what they should pick and what they should not pick, what is going to be relevant, what's not going to be relevant. So in hindsight of that, a big thank you from the campus team.
Sure. Thanks.
Also to the participants who were part of the session today, a big thank you to all of you, and wishing you a very happy new year in advance. And I believe that the new year would be bringing in a lot of opportunities for all. And Persistent is moving at a very fast pace in terms of opportunities for freshers as well as for experienced folks. And we recently have closed on our good numbers through our campus placements, and we look forward for more positive requirements coming in the near future. So all the best, and then we have in attendance today also the entire campus team consisting of Sanket Vaidya from Nagpur. They are also headed by Kalpana, who has been part of this initiative to drive this initiative to bring in maximum knowledge sharing that can be done with the 3 different fraternities, that's the students, faculties, as well as the training and placement cell. And we've tried our best. We have Sudeep Mule from Pune campus team and Siddharth Pense. And a big thank you to our tech team of Smithy, who's also gives us assistance during the sessions that are conducted. So a big thank you.
Thanks, Dominic. Before we sign off, I know it was an hour session, but if people have questions, they can write to me directly. I'll be happy to take it up.
Definitely. So they can also any more questions that the audience have, they can write back to campus@persistent.com. Also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook for all the latest updates that come up from the Persistent side. So all the best, and thank you all for being part of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.